We are living in a complex world. Let's take a look at one of the less discussed aspects of how narratives are created and sustained. Information is controlled and dissent is crushed, especially when a state is at war. An all-pervasive digital authoritarianism has been simmering beneath the bifurcated geopolitical system that is unfolding in the wake of the war in Ukraine. I have been arguing for a while now that regardless of the outcome of this war, under unprecedented sanctions and isolation from the West, Russia will only fall deeper into China's hands. That will have repercussions for a new world order, and contours of which are already visible. If you've read my last column for ThePrint, you'd know its overarching dimensions that I've argued. In my opinion, it is a fallacy to gauge the depth of the China-Russia alliance in rerouted energy flows or ambitious agreements to bolster infrastructural capabilities, or even Beijing's eagerness to circumvent secondary sanctions to supply Moscow with weapons. It does not end there. The gravity of Beijing's dominance over Moscow can be gauged by assessing how the Chinese Communist Party has executed and cemented its reach into Moscow's information control apparatus. That apparatus is the backbone of Kremlin statecraft today. And that should get India worried. It casts doubt on how far and how long sensitive communication and transaction with Russia can remain unscathed by Chinese spying, regardless of what Moscow wants. But let's first understand how the contrasting models of pursuing hegemony have unfolded in the world. The end of history, Francis Fukuyama's famous phrase to describe the end of the Cold War, led the United States to embark upon its unipolar moment. In pursuit to paint the world with a liberal democratic brush, the US found itself rummaging for global hegemony through unending wars, bloodshed, and several unsuccessful attempts at installing democracies. Whereas its major rival China has managed, at least so far, to stay away from military debacles. In fact, China has been trying to posture itself as a peacemaker. It tried in the Ukraine conflict but failed there, but had an important success in the Middle East recently. But again, that's just the surface. Among other capabilities, Beijing has quietly devised and executed strategies to set up the most sophisticated system of surveillance, digital authoritarianism, and espionage. That means spying, not only over its own people, but against the rest of the world as well. Unethical usage of technology is an integral part of CCP's economic statecraft, particularly through networks like the Digital Silk Road. Platforms such as WeChat, Weibo, TikTok, and Chinese giants like Baidu and Huawei create and store databases on which China's digital authoritarianism thrives. And the worrying part is, this set of strategies and technologies is very much central to China's no-limits friendship with Russia. So, what is China's role in developing Kremlin's panopticonic gaze? Kremlin's first tangible crackdown on information closure and surveillance started with a presidential decree months after the 2008 Russo-Georgian War, the first war in Europe after the Cold War. In the same year, a rather inconspicuous Russian agency called the Roskomnadzor, the country's internet and media regulator, was formed. Doubling up as a surveillance machine, this internet blocker agency has emerged as the star performer in the ongoing Ukraine war. It has blocked more than 1.2 million URLs and has been instrumental in censoring Facebook, Twitter, Google, Instagram, you name it, ever since the war with Ukraine started. Not just that, the famed exodus of approximately several hundred journalists from Russia has also been caused by the crackdown unleashed by this very agency, Roskomnadzor. In a CCP-style maneuvering of 24/7 surveillance over its citizens' internet communication and behavior, The agency has also reportedly been using a secret monitoring system to identify activities pertaining to the destabilization of Russian state and society. Russia's internet surveillance system, SORM-3, will be actually expanding the scrutiny by threatening telecom users to cancel their licenses if they fail to install that software on their devices. The New York Times report of leaked Roskomnadzor documents shows that Russia's internet censorship has been instrumental in shaping a conducive domestic information environment to steer a favorable opinion as the Ukraine war goes on. Roskomnadzor's emergence as the most potent tool for information blackouts and mass surveillance in 2022 has not happened overnight. It has roots in a series of restrictive laws introduced from 2012 onwards, which have laid down an enabling legal framework around censorship. So, for more than a decade now, President Putin has been building the Russian version of the Great Firewall of China by incorporating those elements into Russia's Red Web, the country's internet filtering and control system. How did it begin? As Russia stood shunned by the G7 for its actions in Crimea in 2014, Xi Jinping exploited that wedge between West and Moscow by offering the latter the most sensitive of state domain information control and surveillance tools. Kremlin's aim to reclaim influence in its post-Soviet neighborhood unraveled with Moscow controlling information and mass surveilling its subjects in line with the official narrative of Russian statecraft. So Russia's pursuit swayed its regime into the experienced hands of the People's Republic of China, which even then had one of the most advanced digital authoritarianism paraphernalia in the world. In 2015, Russia and China signed an extensive cybersecurity pact under which the two countries promised not to hack each other and reserving their formidable cyber prowess for predictable adversaries. So, I won't hack you, you don't hack me, let's hack our enemies together. That is how China-Russia dark proximity started to develop. In the summer of 2016, Russian conservative lawmaker Irina Yarovaya drafted a reform package as part of a wider anti-terror legislation. Actually, I wonder where was terrorism in Russia in 2016? Anyway, this set of two widely criticized federal laws, thereon called the Yarovaya laws, forced mobile and internet companies to log people's text messages, phone conversations and chats for at least 6 months and hand over the data to security services if ordered by the courts. A few months later, the next phase of China-Russia cyber collaboration began in a rather unprecedented manner. The massive amounts of data generated by Yarovaya's brainchild, the Yarovaya's laws, required befitting storage and processing capabilities that by no means could Russia have boasted in 2016. After all, this was right after the first wave of technological sanctions by the West in the aftermath of the Crimean invasion. So, with an eye on enhancing regime stability and legitimacy, the Yarovaya laws paved the way for Russia's collaboration with Chinese Great Firewall security officials to implement its data retention and filtering infrastructure. So the Chinese got control of all that Russian data and the Russian systems. These laws created the Internet Blacklist Registry managed by the Roskomnadzor and mandated service providers to block access to any objectionable site. In the 10 years from 2012 to 2021, Google received 2.5 lakh requests for the removal of about 3 million items from Russia alone. Perhaps it can explain why Google was banned in the very first month after the Ukraine war. Similarly, a 2013 law with an uncanny resemblance to China's multi-pronged crackdown diktat has given Russia's prosecutor general the power to take down sites that encourage mass riots, extremist activities, or participation in unsanctioned public events. It was under this law that Apple and Google were forced to remove a tactical voting app which followers of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny used to express discontentment with the regime. A few years later, the 2019 Sovereign Internet Law gave Russian government officials the power to pull the plug on the internet if needed. Total blackout. By the end of 2021, Russian courts had already started targeting tech giants such as Alphabet, the parent company of Google, penalizing it with a $98 million fine, and Meta with a $27 million fine for repeatedly failing to delete illegal content. As Facebook and Twitter prepared to leave Russia, two subsidiaries from Russia's state-owned gas company, Gazprom, the Gazprom Media and SOGAZ, it's an insurance company, took over the nation's largest social media network, enabling direct state control over such things. In line with the Chinese model, the singular objective of Russian firewalling is to curtail dissent and strengthen the stability and legitimacy of the regime. But easy access to sensitive state information by actors like Huawei opens up a Pandora's box of likely security breaches. And I don't say it without a background. Huawei, that was shunned by the West, was actually resurrected by Kremlin. Let me tell you how. The deterioration in Russia's relations with the West after 2014 created new opportunities for Huawei. In retaliation to Western sanctions, Putin signed a series of laws aimed at technologically decoupling Russia from the West. As the Donald Trump administration imposed restrictions on Huawei in 2019, it shifted its investments to Russia. It went live in the country after an agreement was signed between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. Under Huawei's assistance, Russia has started deploying mandatory black boxes. These systems intercept and monitor connections and collect data as required. They are also used by government agencies to block websites on the Internet Registry blacklist. The Chinese tech giant has been instrumental in helping Russia make its own digital iron curtain, which is the cornerstone of Kremlin's strategy to perpetuate its narrative today. A recent French report on China's influence operations revealed Huawei's close relationship with the CCP and the latter's use of state-owned and private companies to collect vast amounts of data globally. This paints a rather vexing picture. Dear viewer, the first casualty of any war is truth. While the truth remains elusive and entwined with respective war aims on both sides, what is tangible is the development and deployment of state machinery in censoring information that dispute the state narrative. And while no government can be completely absolved of not spying on its citizens' information and communication, autocratic regimes do it with an absolute authority and justification to a degree that is incomparable with their democratic counterparts, no matter how many shortcomings a democracy might have. India has already seen a surge in China-backed cyber attacks. Huawei and ZTE are under scrutiny in India for allegedly installing backdoor vulnerabilities to spy for the Chinese government. But does India have standalone capabilities lest Huawei spying is rerouted through Russia's channels? It's very unnerving indeed. And therein perhaps lies another lesson for New Delhi to fortify vital information before it's too late. The link to my article is provided in the description box with more references and details. I'll be back to discuss more aspects of the war and pressing issues in global politics. Until then, stay tuned.